This video will contain spoilers for Jujutsu Kaisen chapters 85, the rest of 88, 89, and 90, and Season 2, Episode 9, aka Episode 33. So the second season of Jujutsu Kaisen is opening some gates, and in this series, I'm going to be analyzing the story of the series as it airs and, as a manga reader, comparing the anime to the manga to see what they pulled over directly, what they modified or expanded, and what they just straight up removed. Anyway, without any further ado, let's begin with the 9th episode of Season 2 of Jujutsu Kaisen. First, I'll recap the plot and explain what chapters it covered. The episode begins with Yuji, Megumi, Nobara, Maki, Toge, Panda, Nanami, and Todo being asked who Gojo is to them. They all have varying answers, but they all end up saying he's the strongest. We cut to an exhausted-looking Gojo taking heavy breaths. Then back to where we left off the previous episode, with Gojo singling out Hanami and recalling it's their third time meeting, but Hanami still hasn't learned. He marks Hanami as the one he's going to take down first. Hopping off the gate and back onto the tracks, he casually approaches Jogo and Hanami, asking why they aren't doing anything after they told him not to run away. They engage in a close-quarters scuffle, where Gojo deactivates Infinity, and as Jogo retreats, he gives chase. This confuses Hanami, who thinks that Gojo may have singled him out to confuse them, and with the deactivation of his technique, he must have decided to just fight in close quarters, which makes using the crowd pointless, so Hanami decides to utilize his curse technique against Gojo. In doing so, Hanami deactivates his domain amplification to use his technique, which is exactly what Gojo wanted. Gojo is on Hanami instantaneously, and has him by his eye roots. Gojo mentions that someone told him those were his weak point, and gives him a good tug right out of Hanami's head. He confirms that the curses can't use their innate techniques and domain amplification at the same time. Jogo notes that he only survived the earlier scuffle because his amplification was protecting him, and is surprised that Gojo is still so strong even though he's just fighting hand-to-hand using basic cursed energy reinforcement. As he wonders if Gojo really has any weakness, another piercing blood shot comes at Gojo, but is blocked by Infinity. Gojo shoots Choso an annoyed glance and notes that he's not a cursed spirit, and so is probably the last remaining cursed wound death painting. But as he's less proactive than the two disaster curses, he'll ignore him for now. Jogo and Hanami attempt to jump him, striking at him with domain amplification again. It seems less effective as Gojo ups the output of Infinity to push back against them, warning Jogo that now that he's been weakened, Hanami isn't strong enough to deal with that. Gojo continues expanding Infinity outward, pinning Hanami against the wall. Jogo vainly attempts to draw Gojo's attention away by threatening nearby civilians, but Gojo doesn't hesitate to capitalize on his chance to exorcise Hanami. He atomizes Hanami against the wall by crushing him with Infinity, then turns to Jogo, ready to take him down next. The fight moves up onto the platform from the tracks, and Jogo goes on the run, attempting hit-and-run tactics to strike at Gojo and get away before he can react. Jogo tries to pull Choso back into the action, but not only is blood manipulation a bad matchup for Infinity, but Gojo can tell Choso's at his limit in terms of what he could possibly do against Gojo anyway, so he's not even worth worrying about. As Gojo strategizes and notes it'd be bad for the civilians if his opponents teamed up to do a special attack, Jogo begins to think it must have been at least 20 minutes by now. As he does so, we cut away to Geto hanging out with Dagon, it's a little squid curse, just chillin', and he laments that things are still too easy for Gojo, and they need him more at the end of his rope before Geto can act. At that moment, we cut back to Team Yuji. I know officially they're Team Meimei, but screw that. And the catatonic person he found transfigures suddenly, talking about a train full of people. Yuji connects the dots and realizes that a train of transfigured humans is heading to the platform Gojo is fighting at. It arrives on the tracks opposite the side where the fight started, the doors open, and even more chaos is let loose as the transfigured humans pour out of the train onto the platform, tearing through civilians with reckless abandon. Gojo, now clearly becoming distressed, struggles to figure out what they're doing. Mahito hops off the train like a grade schooler on their way home after the last day of school and greets Jogo. He soaks in the fear of the people around, enjoying it, and says they should keep some to turn into the most dangerous game to hunt in the forest. Jogo asks if he could burn the forest down, and Mahito reminds him that would upset Hanami. Jogo tells Mahito Hanami died, which he doesn't seem too upset about. Gojo still struggles to understand what is going on, noting that whittling down the number of humans present doesn't help them. Mahito hangs 10 and surfs over on a transfigured human to take a swing at Gojo, but obviously fails and only strikes infinity. Excited as he is by experiencing Gojo's infinity for the first time, Gojo realizes this must be the patch-face curse Yuji and Nanami told him about, and attempts to strike him. Dodging away, Mahito makes a comment about it being disgusting that there's so many humans, and behind Gojo the tree roots covering the atrium open and a bunch of people fall onto the tracks. Gojo realizes they must have curses or curse users upstairs forcing people down, like May theorized last episode, and wonders if they plan on throwing everyone in Shibuya down there. Now Gojo's fear is brought to life as both Choso and Mahito pull out new moves. Choso uses Convergence to condense his blood, and then uses Supernova, while Mahito has a new application of Idle Transfiguration, Soul Multiplicity, Body Repel. They fire these off at Gojo, but Infinity stops them. However, a bunch of civilians are caught in the crossfire. Jogo attempts to literally get the drop on Gojo, but fails again and gets his arm yoinked for a second time for his trouble. Despite that, however, he seems pretty smug as he thinks their plan is working. The curses in unison take note that Gojo, while being more cold-hearted than Yuji in terms of making sacrifices, still can't think of people he kills himself as a sacrifice, so he won't use his domain even though that would be his only choice in this situation. As he seems to have stalled, the curses in Choso think they're succeeding at putting him at the end of his rope. Unfortunately for them, Gojo is kinda crazy. They're all surprised as he decides to cast his domain anyway. His all-or-nothing gamble is a domain expansion of 0.2 seconds, a length of time he guessed normal people could withstand unlimited void for. About 6 months' worth of information was dumped into their brains, and the humans who survived the incident would require 2 months of rehab before they could rejoin society. That being said, the curses could recover at any moment. So, with the possibility of them coming to at any moment and counterattacking taken into account, Gojo decides to solely target just the transfigured humans. In this moment, Gojo reaffirms why he's the strongest sorcerer alive, as he successfully kills about 1,000 transfigured humans in just 299 seconds. I did the math for you, it's 4 minutes and 59 seconds, just 1 second shy of 5 minutes. Just as he takes a breath following his Herculean labor, he suddenly notices a mysterious cube covered in Ofida as Geto chants for its gate to open. We cut to a flashback as Geto explains Prison Realm. He says it can seal anything, but the condition is that Gojo must be kept within a 4-meter radius, that's about 13.1 feet for us Freedom Unit users, for 1 minute. Despite Jogo's misgivings, Geto reassures him. The Prison Realm opens and turns into this fucking Silent Hill Decorabia from Persona looking ass thing with a giant eye in the center, which appears to be maybe stapled open, that stares straight into Gojo's soul. Just as he goes to make a move, Geto makes his own, revealing himself to Gojo at last. Having killed Geto just a little less than a year before at the end of the movie, Gojo's 6 eyes reject the possibility of him being any kind of fake or transformed person. The 3 years of his youth we saw part of in the previous arc flash through his brain, and we see that not Geto's reassurance to Jogo was that they only needed to buy 1 minute of time within Gojo's brain, which the trauma dump of seeing his dead best friend speak to him gave them. The Prison Realm latches onto him, and he notes that he can't feel any cursed energy in his body and can't move. Knowing they got him, Gojo demands to know who the man standing in front of him is. Not Geto tries to continue playing the part of Geto, but Gojo denies him, despite the 6 eyes telling him this is the real Geto's body, claiming his soul knows it's not really Geto. Not Geto pulls the string on the conspicuous stitching on his forehead that's been screaming at us in Season 1, and straight up just pulls his entire skull cap off. This reveals a brain with a creepy mouth. Mouths aren't supposed to be there, residing inside the head of Geto's body. He explains that his curse technique allows him to hop between bodies by putting the brain in the body, and that he also gains access to the curse techniques. He was seeking to gain access to Geto's curse manipulation, and set up these exact circumstances for the sake of his plan. and clarifies that he was able to gain access to this body because Gojo didn't have Shoko dispose of Geto's body properly. Thanks to Gojo only being considerate under such awkward circumstances, he didn't even have much trouble doing so. He tells Gojo that he was too strong and needed to get him out of the way, but Gojo chuckles as he remembers that Yuta won his fight against Geto, and reminds Getonte of it. I know officially he's known as Pseudo Geto at this point, but I think that's dumb, and my name is funnier, so I'm just gonna use that. Getonte isn't impressed by Yuta, and claims he won't be the next Gojo, as Mahito wakes up from Unlimited Void. Getonte says goodbye to Gojo, and that they'll meet again in the new world, and the gate closes on Prison Realm, sealing the strongest sorcerer alive and removing him from play. We cut away to Team Yuji running down the tracks towards the platform where Gojo just got sealed, and suddenly Yuji stops and says there's something on his ear. There's a little headphone-looking thing with Mekamaru's face on it, speaking to him in Muta's voice, asking if he can hear him, and tells him time is short, so to listen closely. Gojo Satoru has been sealed, and the episode ends. So with the recap out of the way, let's go over the basic points of the plot. 1. Gojo exorcises Hanami. RIP. I guess we're never seeing his domain expansion now. 2. Gojo pulls off a 0.2 second domain expansion to restrain Mahito and other enemies while also sparing civilians, and manages to kill around 1,000 transfigured humans in just under 5 minutes. 3. Getonte takes advantage of Gojo being so on edge to finally successfully seal him and remove the strongest sorcerer from the board. 4. Yuji randomly stops and notices a communicator-type device with Mekamaru's face, speaking to him in Muta's voice. Now let's get into some analysis. First, a little more on domain amplification, as we see Gojo seemingly resisted here by increasing the strength of Infinity. As I said last episode, it's probably best not to think about it too much, but I can't help but wonder if this is just something that can be done in general to counter domain amplification, or if it has more to do with Hanami being weakened at that point, making it possible to do. We also have to consider that it's possible Gojo simply thought up a countermeasure between the first time seeing it and the second time they tried it. Just some food for thought. Next, I'd like to address the 2 new moves we saw from Choso and Mahito, but they'll actually be explained in more depth later in the arc, so I'll avoid spoiling those details now. Instead, let's have some fun with numbers. In this episode, we're told that a 0.2 second domain expansion of Unlimited Void fills the brains of everyone caught in it with 6 months worth of information. This caught my attention because I thought it was interesting to measure information as an extension of time, since the only scenario I could think of where we do something like that is with distance, and measuring how long it takes to get from one place to another. But I suppose it makes sense because I don't think that we really have a specific unit of measurement agreed upon by scientists that is used to measure information stored in our brain. I've heard some people make comparisons to computer storage, but I don't really remember the specifics at this point. Anyway, I figure if we mainly think of the things stored in our brain as memories, and imagine that memories are kind of like movies, albeit inaccurate ones, it makes sense to measure that information as time, in other words, the length of the quote-unquote movies. So assuming that the 6 months of information is equivalent to all the memories a person would make living one day, we can estimate some things about Unlimited Void. For example, we can use his conversion rate to estimate that 0.4 seconds of exposure to Unlimited Void imparts roughly 1 year's worth of information into the target. This means that 1 minute of exposure to Unlimited Void is equivalent to 150 years worth of information. You can see why things like this might actually just straight up kill a civilian, having a lifetime and a half's worth of info dumped into their brain all at once. Maybe not outright kill them, but it would probably leave them brain dead. Despite that, the ones who experienced it and survived the incident still took 2 whole months of rehab to rejoin society. I also find it super interesting that Gojo's downfall comes about due to a sort of inversion of his domain expansion. The same effect his strongest technique causes on his opponents is used against him in order to keep him in place long enough for the prison realm to seal him, although obviously his opponent there doesn't use his technique, but takes advantage of what can be considered Gojo's one major weakness, the part of him that cares about other people. They were taking advantage of it the whole fight with the civilians, but that was this sort of common decency / professional care for people he didn't know. The final bit of compassion that does him in is remembering his best friend, who he had to kill himself. Also, the prior compassion that kept him from properly disposing of Geto's body. The same thing that separates Gojo from the villains of the story and makes him a hero is what seals his fate, and himself, into the prison realm. Oh, and also there's some irony in the fact that Geto, a person who assimilated and used cursed spirits via his technique, ended up being assimilated and used himself, just in a different sort of way. Lastly, let's go over the in-between pages from these chapters in the manga. We just get a little sketch showing Hanami reacting when Jogo said they told Gojo not to run, which happened last episode. After chapter 86, another one of the same type, this time after Gojo said his "you told me not to run" line, with Hanami having the same reaction again. After chapter 88, we get a 3-page vignette similar to the Juju Scrolls from season 1 that was adapted into the beginning of this episode. After chapter 89, we're given an explanation page addressing that cursed spirit Nobata killed way back in episode 3, and why it could phase through walls, stating that pretty much only low-level cursed spirits can do it. After chapter 90, we get a similar page explaining why the cursed spirits and Geto are always shown playing games, and it's mainly because sorcerers and cursed spirits use complex techniques, making their battles almost like games with complex rules, so it probably helps them to get in the mindset to learn how to fight their opponents. And that's my episode recap and story analysis for the 9th episode of the 2nd season of Jujutsu Kaisen. Make sure to subscribe and turn on bell notifications if you want to be here as soon as possible each week, as I put out new videos for each episode as it airs. And feel free to drop a comment with suggestions as to other videos you might like to see, such as character analysis videos or explanations. Thanks for watching.